There's a specific kind of medical decline that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive like a thunderclap. It builds quietly. You just start adjusting your life. You do less. You rest more. You push through things that suddenly feel impossible.
And at first, you explain it away. We all do this. You think, well, I'm stressed, or I'm just getting older, or maybe I haven't been sleeping well. But over time, there's this gap that opens up, a gap between how you physically feel and what your routine blood work is actually showing. And sitting in that gap is an incredibly isolating place to be.
Because the tests look fine, but your reality isn't.
Exactly. You start to question your own sanity. You feel this intense pressure to explain a biological failure that isn't showing up clearly on a standard metabolic panel. And for people with adrenal insufficiency, especially when it's missed or diagnosed late, that experience is practically a shared trauma.
Today, we're looking at a piece from My Adrenal Life. It breaks down why adrenal insufficiency gets missed, what happens to the body in the meantime, and the psychological weight of not being believed. We're talking primary, secondary, tertiary, and steroid-induced AI.
Which is a lot of ground. But fundamentally, we're talking about a lack of cortisol. Cortisol gets a bad reputation in wellness circles as the stress hormone that makes you hold on to belly fat. But it's actually the hormone of life. It regulates your blood pressure, balances your blood sugar, controls inflammation. When you don't have enough of it, or when it's not available at the exact right time, your body's structural stability just begins to collapse.
It loses its scaffolding.
Right. It loses the physiological scaffolding that keeps you upright and functional. And the article maps this out in phases, which I think is vital for understanding why it's missed. In the early phase, it's just compensation. Symptoms are mild. Your body's working overtime to bridge the gap. So if you go to a doctor then, your labs might actually look okay depending on the time of day.
Wait, I don't know that that feels entirely accurate. Is the body really compensating successfully, or are our tests just too blunt to catch the struggle?
Oh, that's a fascinating distinction. I think it's both, actually. The body is performing a high-wire act. The adrenal glands, or the pituitary, depending on the type, are sputtering. But the biological imperative to stay alive means the body will borrow resources from everywhere to keep you upright. At the same time, you're right, the standard tests are incredibly blunt. A routine cortisol check at 8 a.m. might catch you on a day where the sputtering engine managed to produce just enough to clear the normal threshold, even if it's the bare minimum.
So you get a gold star and are sent home.
You get told you're fine, and then you hit the middle phase. Instability. The symptoms aren't just a bad weekend anymore, they're frequent. Your stress tolerance plummets. A minor cold leaves you bedridden for weeks, but because the symptoms are fatigue, dizziness, brain fog, nausea,
They're like everything else.
They look like modern life. They look like depression or anxiety or a GI bug. In fact, research published in the American Journal of the Medical Sciences found that 68% of patients with adrenal insufficiency were initially given a false diagnosis, most commonly psychiatric or gastrointestinal. And nearly 70% of them had to consult at least 3 different doctors.
That's a systemic failure. That's not a tricky disease. That's a blind spot in how we evaluate chronic, vague symptoms.
It absolutely is a blind spot, and the timeline is staggering. The same study noted that 20% of patients suffered for more than 5 years before finally getting the correct diagnosis. 5 years of your body slowly losing its ability to regulate itself while doctors tell you that you just need antidepressants or a different diet.
And the gender split is massive there too, right?
Huge! Less than 30% of women were diagnosed within the first 6 months of symptom onset, compared to about 50% of men. Women are systematically told their physical failing is just anxiety. Actually, no, it's worse than that. It's not just that they're told it's anxiety. It's that the medical system actively stops looking once the anxiety label is applied.
The label becomes the ceiling of their care.
Exactly. And this leads us to the late phase. Decompensation, the breaking point. The body can no longer maintain the illusion of balance. This usually happens during a stressor, a surgery, an injury, a bad flu. In a healthy person, cortisol spikes to handle the stress. In someone with adrenal insufficiency, the tank is empty. The demand suddenly skyrockets, but the supply is zero.
Which triggers the adrenal crisis.
Right. Severe low blood pressure, dehydration, shock. It's a medical emergency. And tragically, for many patients, this crisis is the very first time anyone takes their symptoms seriously. They have to literally be on the edge of death for the medical system to recognize the condition.
I hear that, but I keep getting stuck on the mechanics of the diagnosis itself. If we know that waiting for a crisis is lethal and we know the early tests are blunt, why haven't the protocol changed? Are endocrinologists just accepting this delayed timeline?
That's the friction point in the field right now. Primary care doctors are usually the ones seeing these vague symptoms, and they aren't trained to immediately suspect an incredibly rare endocrine disorder. It's a needle in a haystack problem. If 1,000 people present with fatigue, 999 of them might have sleep apnea, depression, or a viral hangover. The one with adrenal insufficiency gets lost in the math, but the cost for that one person is catastrophic, and the psychological impact of that delay is profound.
Let's dig into that psychological impact, because the article makes a point that this isn't just physical damage.
Right. Imagine spending 5 years being told your extreme weakness is just stress. You start to internalize it. You lose confidence in your own body's signals. It's a form of medical gaslighting, whether intentional or not. Studies show that even after patients are stabilized on treatment, they suffer from high rates of psychological morbidity, irritability, anxiety, and impaired quality of life. It's not just the hormone deficit. It's the trauma of the diagnostic journey.
You can't just hand someone a pill and expect them to immediately trust a system that ignored them for half a decade.
You can't. Receiving the diagnosis brings relief. Yes, you finally have a name for the monster in the dark, but it doesn't erase the years you spent thinking you were losing your mind. Rebuilding trust, both in the medical establishment and in your own body, is a very slow, very deliberate process. It's about learning your body's specific patterns all over again.
And giving yourself permission to be angry about the time that was stolen from you. Moving forward isn't about pretending the delay didn't happen. It's about integrating that reality.
Integration is the perfect word for it. It's understanding that your experience always made sense, even when no one else could see it. The body was telling the truth the entire time.
The body keeps the receipts. This piece from My Adrenal Life really grounds that experience. It validates the space between knowing something is wrong and finally getting the proof.
It gives people a framework to understand their own history, which is a powerful thing to give someone who has been living in the dark.
If you or someone you know is navigating the complex reality of a delayed diagnosis, share this conversation. Sometimes just hearing that the timeline wasn't your fault is the exact starting point you need.